Good afternoon, Conway Cougars and my Jedi friends. We are continuing with Small Spaces, Chapter 19. Yeah. We left off yesterday where Ollie, Coco, and Brian crossed the footbridge across the creek into the farm area, and they kept seeing all these scarecrows that looked like their friends, or were they their friends? They were pretty sure they were going to save them. So now on to Chapter 19. In the strange shadow world, Linda Webster's fresh-painted farmhouse was faded, old, and ugly. Its door hung a little open, making Ollie think of spider webs, if there were flies. But she marched forward anyway, and just as she got to the open door with Brian and Coco too far back to hear, Ollie glanced down at her watch. Up, it said. Ollie looked up, but there was nothing there. Despite herself, she whispered, "Mom, is that you? Can you hear me?" Silence, only the rustling of corn. Then the screen flickered. "Always," it said. Ollie closed her eyes, pressed the watch to her lips, felt herself shake. "I want to talk to you," she said, softer still. Silence. "Up," the watch said again. Ollie glanced back into the farmyard. Had all the scarecrows been facing the house before? Because all those faces, every single one of those scarecrow faces, was pointed towards the front door. Guys," said Ollie, "look, have the scarecrows." Brian and Coco turned and shuddered. All the scarecrows had their hands up. The light glinted dully on the tips of the rakes and the edges of scythes and trowels. "Yes," Brian whispered. "They've definitely moved." "Come inside," said Ollie, trying to sound as brave as she could. "Look around. We have to hurry." She went into the house with her two friends at her heels. The floorboards creaked. The wallpaper was coming off in streamers. A little thin daylight trickled in the dirty windows, but the shadows seemed to lie thick in the corners. To their right lay a sitting room, with torn pink fabric on the walls, and in front of them was a staircase leading up to the blackness of the second floor. To the left was the kitchen. "Hello?" called Coco. "Is anyone there?" No answer. Ollie looked at her watch. 45 minutes and 16 seconds, said the countdown. Up. Ollie headed into the kitchen. Coco and Brian had followed. There was no sound but the squeaking floorboards. The kitchen was full of old-fashioned plates and cups and pots, all covered with a thick layer of dust. The wood stove was rusty, and the wood beside it was bone dry. "Oh. I think we should go upstairs," said Ollie. "My watch says up." Brian was already poking through the wood pile. "Hang on, there's kindling there," he said. "I'm going to make a fire, if I can find some matches." "And let everyone know we're here," Ollie snapped. Yeah. Brian shrugged. "The scarecrows know already," he pointed out. Mm-hmm. "If anyone else is out there, they'll probably know too. I'm cold, you're cold, Coco's got wet feet, and she's probably really cold." Yeah. Coco's small face looked pale and pinched under Ollie's rainbow hat. "Just a bit cold," she said stubbornly. "You'll be a lot warmer with dry socks," said Brian. "We'll make a fire and dry them out. Tell your mom to buy you wool socks next time. Cotton's no good." "If the chimney's blocked, you'll burn the house down," Ollie warned, but only half-heartedly. Brian was right. Coco was really pale, and they didn't want her getting sick. "Well," said Brian with a ghost of good cheer, "let's find out." He began to lay a fire. "I bet Coco'd kill for dry socks, let alone risk burning the house down." "You do that," Ollie said. "I'm still going upstairs." "I don't think we should split up," said Coco. What if bad things come?" "And you It's not dark yet," Ollie said. "That's not the only bad thing," cried Coco. "What about the ghost?" "She wasn't bad," said Ollie, "just dead." Coco looked exasperated. She was scary. "I'm saying down here," she said. Brian cried, "Matches!" He popped up the pantry covered in cobwebs, waving a dusty old matchbox. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" asked Coco. But she looked happier than she had in a while. Who could blame her? Even Ollie was cold, and she was wearing more clothes and used to being outside all the time. "Yep," said Brian. He began putting wood on the stove. "I hope it works," said Coco eagerly. Ollie unzipped her backpack and pulled out her unicorn lunchbox. She broke off a piece of the pumpkin pie and put the rest on the table. "Here," said Ollie, "we should eat something before it gets dark. Try not to burn the house down. I'm going upstairs." Ollie marched off, chomping her portion of the slice of pie, leaving Brian and Coco going through their lunchbox on the scared kitchen table. A little fire had begun to sputter in the stove. Ollie wondered if she wasn't doing something really dumb going off by herself. The first bedroom was just to the right of the top of the staircase. The wallpaper had a pattern of cherries, which should have been cheerful, except the wallpaper was stained, and the only light came from the gloomy outdoors. The bed had a moth-eaten red blanket, a vanity table with empty bottles, a bookshelf. Ollie paused in the doorway, glancing behind her. Nothing. Just a hallway with stairs at one end, and the other end dark.
Oh, no!
Ollie bit her lip. Each step she took made the floor creak. Ollie crept closer to the bookcase. A Bible. A book of common prayers. A child's guide to virtue. Mrs. Beardsley's domestic sciences. Another floorboard creaked. It took her a moment to realize it wasn't her. She whirled. Steps coming from the darkness at the end of the hall. Soft, steady steps.
Oh.
Ollie froze. A hand appeared in the door frame. A thin, yellow, nailed hand.
It's going to be the next chapter.
Then a face popped out of the edge of the doorway. A gasp came strangling out of Ollie's throat. It was a woman, or it had been. Her skin was sunken in beneath her cheekbones, and when she smiled, her lips stretched too wide, the way a skull smiles. She stood in the doorway, blocking Ollie's escape. "Who are you?" whispered Ollie. Her voice came out thin and scared. A dry whisper murmured back. "My name is Beth Webster." Ollie's spine was pressing up against the bookcase. "Beth Webster is dead." The woman in the doorway said nothing, but her smile grew and grew humorously until it took up her entire lower face. Ollie had to bite back a scream. "I died in this room," whispered the woman. The rustle of her clothes sounded like dead leaves on the other side of the mist. "How'd you get to this side?" Ollie managed to ask around her dry throat. "Jonathan's here," Beth said. She clasped her hands together, long-fingered and bony. "The dead go where they will, and I wouldn't leave him. Wouldn't leave the farm when I was alive, and I won't leave him now. Even the smiling man can't make me. He'd like it, though. Oh, yes, he would." "Why?" Ollie asked. Her lungs felt squeezed with fright. "Because he doesn't have the power over the dead," said Beth. "And I'm not forgetting myself like Kathy did. Poor Kathy Webster. There's not much left of her now." "Forgetting yourself," said Ollie. "Is Kathy forgetting herself? But why is she here? Because her sons are?" "Yes," said Beth. "Kathy wouldn't leave her children, not for anything. But that's what happens to ghosts. Their minds go, and then you're only a memory going through the same things over and over." "Then why aren't you like that?" said Ollie. She had begun to recover from her fright. Beth was scary, but she stood in the doorway and looked. "I wrote a book," said Beth thoughtfully. "I think that's why. I put myself into it, all my days and nights and hopes and dreams, my whole life. I think my book is the reason I still remember, although maybe it would be easier to forget." Maybe that's why the smiling man wanted Linda Webster to get rid of the book, Ollie thought, to stop Beth from hanging around. Ollie thought of the watch's instructions up. Maybe Beth Webster knew something important. "Do you know how my friends and I can get home?" she asked. "Do you know how to turn the scarecrows back into people? Do you know how to beat the smiling man?"
No.
The ghost laughed a long, shrill burst. "The smiling man is older than old," Beth said, grinning. "You can't beat him. You might be happier in the corn with him. At least scarecrows feel nothing." "Shut up," snapped Ollie. "We're not going to be scarecrows. I'm going home to my dad. How do we get home?" "The cornfield is the doorway." "The cornfield is the doorway," said the ghost. "It's a maze, a corn maze. The scarecrows exist here and there. They are neither flesh nor spirit. They hold the door open for him. They are his servants in the world and his gatekeepers in the other." Big tears, as horrible as her laughter, ran down her bony face. "And I am only a ghost, and my love is a scarecrow, and the servant of that horrible man." Her sad mouth seemed to droop down her face as though her skin was rotten. "How do we change the scarecrows back?" Ollie asked, torn between pity and horror. "I don't know. Until the mist becomes rain," Jonathan told me once. "But I don't know what that means. I'm sorry, she said with a new note in her voice. You have to go now. That was when Ollie heard her watch beeping. Insistently, she realized how thick the shadows had grown. She looked down at her watch. 5 minutes. 5 minutes? I should have told you sooner, whispered Beth Webster. She was crying, dusty, waterless tears. I'm sorry, but what's the use? You're never leaving this place. Never, 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 never. Oh my heavens, guys, that is scary. So Ollie, Coco, and Brian are no closer to figuring out how to turn all the scarecrows back to kids. But they do know the way out is through the corn maze.
Which is bad because the scarecrows are there.
Yeah, so tune in tomorrow for chapter 20. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.